The sun had just begun to dip behind the city skyline when I pulled into our driveway, the day's frustrations clinging to me like the summer's humidity. Walking through our front door, I was greeted not by the familiar quiet of our home, but by the sound of water cascading onto tile. The urgency in the noise quickened my pace to the bathroom. "Honey? What happened?" I called out, my voice tinged with both concern and annoyance. As I rounded the corner, the sight before me brought a rush of confusion. Water pooled on the floor, spilling from the cabinet under the sink. "Oh, it's a mess." Lila's voice floated from the kitchen, her tone flustered but strangely light. "I think the pipes burst or something. I had to call the plumber you didn't like, said he was the only one available today." A crease formed on my forehead. "The one from downtown? I thought we agreed." Room. The doorbell rang, cutting off my protest. Lila dashed past me to open the door, her steps eager. That should have been my first clue. In strode a man, broad-shouldered and wearing a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. He nodded at me briefly before following Lila to the bathroom. His tool bag clanked heavily with each step. I hovered by the kitchen, unease mounting as I listened to their muffled voices, punctuated by laughter, her laughter, which I hadn't heard in months. Something gnawed at my gut, a suspicion that whispered through the cracks of my denial. Forcing a casual demeanor, I walked to the bathroom doorway. "Everything under control here?" "Oh, yes," Lila chirped, not meeting my eyes as she hovered close to the plumber, who was now kneeling by the sink. His hands were busy, but not with pipes. "Just a small fix," he said without looking up. "Shouldn't take long." I nodded, the pieces clicking together with a reluctant inevitability. The laughter, her eagerness, the choice of plumber, it all made a cruel kind of sense. As I retreated to the kitchen, my heart thudded with a mixture of betrayal and resolution. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Dinner was a silent affair, with Lila chattering about her day, avoiding topics of any real substance. I responded with noncommittal grunts, my mind racing. After dinner, while Lila showered, I went to our bedroom, my resolve hardening. Opening her laptop, I found what I dreaded yet expected, emails exchanged with that plumber, dates and times marked with anticipation. My role in her life had been reduced to a mere provider, an oblivious participant in her deception. That night, as Lila slept, I sat in the living room, the glow of the city's lights casting long shadows. I wasn't just going to walk away. No, I would ensure she understood the gravity of her betrayal. I would dismantle the life she knew, piece by piece. Starting tomorrow, her deceit would be met with my calculated revenge. The game had just begun, and I was no longer playing the fool. Morning light spilled across the kitchen counter, casting long shadows that mirrored the darkness swirling within me. As I brewed coffee, the silence of our home was a stark contrast to the storm of emotions I felt. Lila was still asleep, unsuspecting of the tempest about to break. With a steaming mug in hand, I sat at the dining table, my laptop open to a new, untraceable email account. It was time for the first move in my calculated game of retribution. I composed an anonymous message to Lila's workplace, hinting at a scandal involving a high-profile client and an employee. Precision in my words was key. I needed her superiors to probe, but not to trace it back to me. As I hit send, the weight of my actions pressed down on me, but the sharp sting of betrayal propelled me forward. I couldn't, and wouldn't, back down now. Footsteps alerted me to Lila's approach before she appeared in the kitchen, a forced smile playing on her lips. "Good morning," she murmured, reaching for a cup. "Morning," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Sleep well?" She nodded, oblivious to my inner turmoil. "Yeah, I did. Hey, I'm thinking of calling off from work today. Maybe we could, I don't know, go out or something?" The irony of her suggestion twisted in my gut, but I masked my disdain with a nonchalant shrug. "I can't today. Got a busy schedule. But you should relax." Disappointment flickered across her face, but she quickly masked it. "Okay, maybe some other time." As she turned away, my phone buzzed, a notification from the bank. I checked it discreetly, confirming that the second part of my plan was in motion. I had started transferring sizable amounts from our joint account to a private one I had set up months ago, anticipating a potential need for financial security. Today, it served a dual purpose, securing my future and destabilizing hers. Mid-morning, I left for a meeting, my mind a battleground of strategy and sorrow. Upon returning, I found Lila pacing in the living room, phone in hand, her face a canvas of worry. "What's wrong?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "It's my job," she blurted out, the words tumbling in a rush. "They've started an internal review. Someone sent an email about inappropriate relationships. They think I might be involved." The room filled with her panic, but I stood calm, an observer to her unraveling. "That's serious," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "But if you haven't done anything wrong, you've got nothing to worry about, right?" Her eyes darted to mine, searching for reassurance. "Right, of course," she stammered, but the seed of doubt was planted, her confidence shaken. "I'm sure it'll blow over soon," I reassured her, my words hollow to my own ears. The rest of the day, I watched her struggle, torn between satisfaction and a residual pang of our lost love. By evening, another piece of my plan clicked into place. I had arranged for the plumber to show up under the guise of a follow-up check, knowing it would rattle her further. When the doorbell rang, Lila jumped, her anxiety palpable. I answered the door, greeting the plumber with a cold nod. Lila's face went pale as he stepped inside, a confused frown marring his features. "Just here to check on the sink," he said, looking between us. "Sure," I replied, my tone clipped. "Lila, why don't you show him?" As they disappeared into the bathroom, the sound of their low voices was like a symphony to my ears. Each note of discomfort from Lila, each pause of uncertainty from the plumber, played into the larger tune of my revenge. This was just the beginning, and the end, when it came, would be orchestrated with the same precision and coldness that her betrayal had carved into my heart. The plumber's visit left the air thick with tension. After a brief and uncomfortable inspection of the sink, which I insisted on observing, he left, casting wary glances back at us. Lila was visibly shaken, her usual composure frayed at the edges. As soon as the front door closed behind him, I turned to Lila, my voice cool and measured. "Is there something you want to tell me about him?" Her eyes widened, and she hesitated, a clear sign of her internal struggle. "No, nothing." "Why would you ask that?" "Just curious how you two seemed quite familiar." I leaned against the door frame, watching her carefully. Lila's face fell, and she wrapped her arms around herself, as if suddenly cold. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "Oh?" "Enlighten me then," I pressed, stepping closer. She took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of her secrets was too much to bear. We had something. A while ago. It's over now. I swear." The confession, although expected, sliced through me, its sharpness as potent as the first sting of her betrayal. "How long?" My voice was a low growl, demanding the truth. "A few months," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It ended before today, I promise." I nodded slowly, processing her words while plotting my next move. "And the sink, Lila? Was that just a convenient excuse?" She didn't respond, confirming my suspicions. This deception was deeper and more calculated than a mere fling. That evening, as Lila tried to mend things with hollow apologies, I sat in my study, my mind racing with plans. The first phase of exposing her deceit at her workplace and destabilizing our finances was just the beginning. Now, with her admission, I had the leverage I needed to escalate my revenge. The next morning, I took a more direct approach. While Lila was in the shower, I accessed her phone, which she had carelessly left unlocked on the kitchen counter. Scrolling through her messages, I found more evidence of her duplicity, not just with the plumber, but with others. The deceit ran deeper than I had imagined. Screenshots taken, I sent them to my secure drive, ensuring I had backups for what was to come. Armed with this new ammunition, I confronted her at breakfast. "I know about the others, Lila. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. Her face paled, and she dropped her fork with a clatter. I can explain, she stammered, but I raised a hand to stop her. No need. You've done enough explaining. I'm going to the lawyer today. I want a divorce. Her eyes filled with tears, a mixture of fear and regret. Please, can't we talk about this? I think we're beyond talking, I said coldly. You made your choices, Lila. Now, I'm making mine. As I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the tile, I felt a surge of empowerment. The pain she had caused was turning into a force of retribution. I wasn't just going to divorce her, I was going to expose her lies to everyone who thought she was the perfect wife. The rest of the day was a blur of meetings with lawyers and calls to a few close friends and family members, setting the stage for the public revelation of Lila's actions. By the time I returned home, Lila had packed a bag and was waiting by the door, her eyes red-rimmed. I'll stay at my sister's, she said quietly, her voice resigned. I nodded, feeling a complex mix of victory and sorrow. Goodbye, Lila. As she walked out, the finality of the moment settled in. I had avenged the betrayal, but at the cost of the life we had built together. Yet, as I watched her drive away, I knew this was only the beginning of rebuilding my own life, free from deceit. The following weeks felt like a chess game, with each move more calculated and decisive. My days were consumed with planning, ensuring that every aspect of my revenge was precise and damning. Lila's life, once filled with secret rendezvous and whispered lies, was now unraveling at the seams. I had gathered enough evidence to not only secure a favorable divorce settlement but also to expose her deceit to all who knew her. The whispers had started, subtle at first, then growing louder as the details of her affairs began to leak into our social circles and professional networks. One cool evening, I arranged to meet Lila at our now nearly empty house to finalize the divorce papers. She walked in, her posture defeated, her eyes wary. Is everything in order? She asked, her voice hollow. Yes, I replied, sliding the envelope across the table to her. Everything's been settled. This is the last step. As she signed the papers, her hand trembled slightly. I hope you find it in you to forgive me someday, she said softly. I looked at her, my expression unreadable. Forgiveness is a luxury I can't afford. The doorbell rang, interrupting our somber moment. Confusion crossed Lila's face, but I stood up to answer it, knowing exactly who was on the other side. 2 police officers stood at the door, their expression stern. Are you Mr. Jameson? One asked. Yes, I am. How can I help you? My tone was calm, controlled. We're here regarding a report of fraudulent financial activities and multiple affairs involving sensitive information. We need to speak with Mrs. Jameson. Lila's gasp was audible from the doorway. She appeared beside me, her face pale as she realized the finality of my revenge. This must be some mistake, she stammered, looking from me to the officers. There's no mistake, I said, turning to face her. Your affairs weren't just personal, Lila. You used company resources to cover them up, communicate, and even gift company secrets. I've handed over all the evidence. The officers stepped inside, one beginning to read Lila her rights as the other began to question her about her actions. I don't understand, Lila whispered, her voice cracking. How could you do this to me? You broke more than just vows and trust, Lila, I said, my voice void of warmth. You gambled with your career and reputation. You chose this path. As the officers escorted her out, Lila's eyes met mine, filled with betrayal and despair. The door closed behind her with a definitive thud, sealing her fate and ending our chapter together forever. Standing alone in the empty house, I felt a strange sense of peace mixed with bitter triumph. The game was over, and I had won, but the cost was etched deep in the shadows of the home we once shared. Months later, after the divorce was finalized and the scandals had settled into quiet whispers, I visited a small cafe by the sea. There, I watched the waves crash against the shore, thinking about the ruins of my past life. As I sipped my coffee, a woman approached my table, her presence cautious yet curious. Excuse me, are you Mr. Jameson? I read about your case. It's quite the story. Yes, that's me, I replied, signaling her to sit. As she talked, her words weaving through tales of her own betrayals and recoveries, I realized something vital. In my quest for revenge, I had lost a part of myself to the darkness. Perhaps it was time to rebuild, not with vengeance, but with new beginning. I need to speak with Mrs. James. Sunset, casting golden hues over the water, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself a small, hopeful smile. The past was behind me, and the future, uncertain as it was, held a flicker of something new, something better.